notice what you're sailing by goes way to the side.
Good morning, I'm Will Lesh, and I just wanted to do a short primer, about a 10-minute primer on tuning your T37, because that's kind of once you get familiar with the controls and sailing and everything, tuning is one of the really fun parts of sailing a T37, and it's one of the crucial parts to racing successfully and getting your boat sailing its best and fastest. And amazingly, you know, it looks like a boat's sailing really well, but you get out there racing, and if a boat's really well tuned, perfectly tuned for the conditions of that day, like strong winds or light winds or smooth water or choppy water, if it's tuned right for those conditions, you'll find that your boat is just such a pleasure to sail and so fast. When I'm racing and my boat is sailing perfectly, I don't want to touch anything, but there are other days when I'm out there and it's just my boat isn't as fast as it should be, and I know it's not tuned quite right, and I'll keep trying to adjust it until I get it. So it is really sailing fast, and I'm really pleased, and I'm winning races. So it's a lot of fun. It's not a science, it's more of an art, and every day is a little bit different, and every boat tunes a little bit differently too. There are quite a few variations in how the boat's tuned, so you can look at other people's boats, fast boats, and say, well, what do you think about my boat, how I've got it tuned, and copy how they've tuned it, and that may help, but your boat may tune a little differently than their boat for maximum performance. So it's really a fun aspect of sailing T37s, and since everything's adjustable, you have complete control, and everything that you learn tuning your T37 is also relevant to tuning full-size boats and increasing their performance. So I've got my boat. I just wanted to show you the carrying case for the sail and the boat. The carrying case, this one is just foam board, and that works fine, but also the corrugated, Chris's case for his sails is a corrugated plastic case. Same concept, but different material. So anything like that works fine. And then this is the carrying case developed by Tippecanoe Boats and available as a kit, and it's awfully nice and convenient for transporting your boat. So let's get this set up quickly, and we will talk about tuning. One of the things you might notice on this boat, and it's something that's taken us quite a long time to develop, is the wind indicator at the top, the feather indicator. That's been awfully nice. And I feel especially qualified to talk about tuning today because just a couple weeks ago I finished in third place at the regional championships hosted by the Port Ludlow T37 group held at the Port Madison Yacht Club. And so I was real pleased to finish in third place, and I felt my boat was sailing really well. It just seemed very fast, and I had it tuned just right for the conditions. First place was Peter Conzi. He has his boats. He has two boats, which he alternates depending on the day, two T37s. And he had his boat just sailing incredibly fast, perfectly tuned. So he finished in first place. And then Dan Newland, who is such a brilliant guy. I actually was beating Dan and was in second place throughout the morning. And then Dan had some superb races and beat me a few times in the afternoon. And so he moved into second place, and I was delighted to hold on to third place because there were a lot of good sailors down there from the Port Ludlow group and from the Seattle group. Dan Newland is quite a sailor. He built his own 36-foot carbon fiber full-size 36-foot racing sloop, ultralight, and sailed that for many years. And so he's had years and years of big boat sailing experience as well as model boat sailing experience. So also he was my host for the weekend. I stayed with Dan and Linda, so I didn't want to beat my host, but he was just sailing faster than I was, so that was fine. And Dan's one of those brilliant people that I'm always feel very complimented to get to spend time with. So it was a great event. Okay, now we've got our boat set up, and you can see the wind indicator is very responsive. The wind indicator helped me a lot at the regionals because the wind was very shifty. At times we'd have 180-degree shifts, and I'd be sailing, thinking I was sailing upwind, and the wind indicator all of a sudden would tell me, whoa, the wind just swung around and you're now sailing downwind. I'd let my sails out seconds before the rest of the fleet and gain a few boat lengths. So the wind indicator has been really nice. It just works really splendidly, and it's very simple and inexpensive from Tippecanoe. A lot of people have come up with different feather systems, but we have this one available if you want to order one. Okay, now let's start with tuning. Most races are won sailing upwind. So let's start with tuning for an upwind course. Downwind, you know, occasionally if you're on a part of the course that is getting a little bit more breeze than another part of the course, you might pass a few boats sailing downwind. But most races are won by boat speed sailing upwind. And so we're going to turn so we're sailing into the wind more. Now we're set up and we have batteries in, and we use the magnetic switch, which just takes a swipe of the magnet to turn on, and that's off, and that's turned back on. Come on. Have to get the magnet position. That's on now. Okay, so we don't have to open the cockpit cover. It can be a convenience. Now the first thing, the thing that will kill your boat speed and make your boat almost unsaleable, it won't want to tack or anything, is if you have the slot between the jib and the mainsail closed down. If you have, when you sheet in your mainsail all the way in, and if your jib comes in the same amount, like so, there's no slot, there's no opening between the jib and the mainsail, and your boat will just have no speed upwind, won't sail upwind. It's just total disaster because the air coming off the jib hits the front edge of the mainsail and there's a lot of turbulence. There's no place for that air to go. So you need to have your jib, so it's far, the jib boom is never center line. Jib boom's always out to the side. This is about 2 inches now and this is sheeted all the way in on the mainsail, and we have about 2 inches here between the jib boom and the mast. That's the smallest slot you want. Now, the slot should be uniform all the way up, uniform relative to the cord length of the jib. So, longer cord length here at the bottom of the jib, so slightly wider slot because there's going to be more air coming off, you know, the bottom of the jib where the jib has more sail area. At the top of the jib, the slot eventually closes to zero because there's very little air coming off the very pointy top of the jib. So the slot is really critical. Now, let's talk about tuning the jib generally. Generally, if you have your backstay really loose, your jib boom is going to be free to lift up, and you're going to get your jib, the jib will be in fairly far at the bottom, but up here your jib will be way out. So there are a lot of different angles on the jib. So there's no way to have your jib set correctly for your sailing course because all parts of the jib are set differently because the sail area, the sail angle relative to the wind changes as you go up. So that's not good. You want to have your backstay a little bit tighter. That's also, if you have your backstay a little too tight, you might have your jib leech stretched super tight, and that's not going to be quite right either. You want a little bit of looseness in here in the leech, and you can control that with the topping lift on the jib boom. But if you have your topping lift too tight, you're going to have that same problem where the bottom of the jib is in fairly close and the top of the jib is blowing out, and you don't have your sail set correctly ever relative to the wind direction. So not too much topping lift, maybe just a little bit so you have a bit of a curve there, but not a lot of curve. And as we talk about stronger winds, we'll talk about how you want your sails flatter and flatter as the wind gets stronger. But let's start with light air. light air, this is looking pretty good. This is actually very similar. Oh, I have this rig drum. Look at that. Here I am. I should know how to rig my boat. So this main sheet, I was wondering about that. This main sheet comes through the eye on the boom and then to the clip. So that's why my mainsail wasn't coming in all the way. Okay, now when we bring the main in, it's coming in to the center line, and the jib's little, that's more like 2.5 inches there. And this is the way I had my boat tuned for the regionals, and it just sailed beautifully. So about 2.5 inches or 3 inches there, main boom centered, and some topping lift, but not too much. Backstay is not sloppy loose, but it's pretty darn loose here. If it's sloppy loose, your forestay will be really sloppy loose, and you can't sail upwind because this forestay, the front edge of the jib, will always be curving off to leeward. And so you want, in light air, you want enough backstay that the front edge of your jib stays fairly straight. Okay, so let's look at light air sailing. You want as much fullness as possible in the sails. This might be a little bit tight here for light air. Let's loosen that up just a little bit. So we have about an easy 2 fingers in there. And that's still too tight. So we have the tuning so things are not going to slide. No, I think I'm actually adjusting the wrong one. Here we go. Okay, so now we've got more like 2 fingers in here between the boom and the foot of the sail. We could loosen this up. This is for pretty extremely light air, where you want fullness. You won't be able to point quite as high, but you'll have more power and more speed if you have your sails fuller. So that looks pretty good for light air. A little bit more space here than here, just because the cord length is more on the mainsail than on the jib. So that looks pretty nice for light air. Now, one of the things we want to look at is the see if you get the camera angle right for this, is the slot. We want the slot to be can't get the, move around here, Chris. There we go. We want the slot to be relatively, now I'm sensing the slot is a little tight here and too wide open here. So to affect that, we want less topping lift. See how the slot up here gets more uniform? There. Now, tighten the backstay and release the topping lift, and now the slot is kind of relative to the cord length is pretty uniform as we go up. It doesn't billow out in the middle, so we're not losing power in the middle of the jib. So that's looking pretty good. So, and you can kind of waft your boat back and forth to get a sense. It's still billowing out a little bit more when I put a little more pressure in there. So I might tighten up the backstay just a little bit more, but we're pretty close in there. Okay, now my slot looks pretty uniform going up from the bottom of the, from the tack of the jib, or the clew of the jib, up to the head of the jib. So, so I like that. The mainsail looks pretty good. The back edge of the mainsail isn't billowing out. If I let more boom bang off, the back edge of the mainsail will start to billow out. Let's see which is the boom bang. I should know which my trim lines are, but let's see. The boom bang is this one. You don't want the leech of the jib of the mainsail to be billowing out either, because again, that means part of the sail is working for you. So I'm letting off a lot of boom bang. Now the back edge of the mainsail is the leech of the mainsail is billowing out a little bit too much up here. So that's called twist, when the sail is in at the bottom but farther out as you go up. A little bit of twist can be useful because the wind is moving slower down along the water and a little faster when you get up 2 feet above the water. So occasionally some twist is good, but if you have very much twist, you're not going to be able to point as high because the bottom part of the sail might be catching the wind properly, but the upper part of the sail won't be, you won't be able to point because the sail's too far out at the upper part of the sail. Okay, so we're going to tighten up that boom bang a little bit again, get the sail so the leech is not billowing out. That looks good. And tighten the boom bang retainers line. And we've got a pretty good setup here. Now, there are a few things. The light air, if it's really flat water, you can point incredibly high, and you don't need a lot of power. So you might want to, in light air with flat water, you might want to flatten your sails out a little bit so you can point higher. If you can point 5 degrees higher than other boats, you're going to get to the upwind mark a lot faster. So it's a combination of, well, I can't, if I flatten my sails a little bit, I can point higher, but I won't be quite as fast. If I let my sails be a little fuller, I won't be able to point quite as high, but I'll be faster, which is going to work better for me. So a little bit of combination. If it's really choppy, light air and choppy, at that point, light air and choppy, you want to have more power. In chop, you'll lose all your speed if you try to point too high. So in chop, keep your sails a little fuller and don't try to point quite as high. Now let's quickly look at heavy air sailing. As we move from light air to heavy air, we go through sort of a gradual progression of changes. In heavy air, there are some problems that you can tune for. First of all, you've got a lot of power. You're overpowered. You've got too much power. You're heeling too much, heeling more than you want to. As you heel more, what happens is when the boat's upright, the pull forwards on the boat is not like a line on the bow. It's more like a rope, towing rope up about a little over a third of the way up the mast. And so if the boat's upright, it's pulling you straight forwards. But if the boat is heeled over, that line is pulling you not straight forwards, but trying to spin you up into the wind always. You're being pulled from up the mast, and the mast is now out beside the boat, and you're being spun into the wind. If you're heeled extremely, you're being spun into the wind strongly, and that's weather helm. And to counteract the weather helm, you have to use your rudder. Rudder creates a lot of drag and slows the boat down if you're having to steer a lot with your rudder, because now it's not cutting through the water straight, it's at a fairly extreme angle to keep the boat sailing straight, and so your rudder is dragging and creating a lot of turbulence. So if we can reduce that heeling a little bit, you're going to be faster in strong winds because you won't need to use as much rudder. So to reduce the heeling in strong winds, we can depower the sails by flattening the sails out as much as possible. So we want things to be a lot tighter, and by flattening the sails, we'll also be able to point upwind higher, closer to the upwind mark on each course, on each tack. So in strong winds, we'll tighten everything up, flatten our sails out. We'll also, if we don't tighten the backstay, we'll find that in strong winds, the head stay is being pushed sideways and won't be a straight line from the mast down to the front of the jib boom. So that'll inhibit our being able to point high, close to the wind. So we'll tighten up the backstay a lot and flatten out our sails. That tightens the forestay. That also tightens, since the attachment point to the deck is set back, that also pulls down on the leech of the mainsail, of the jib rather. If that pulls down too much, we may have it tighter than we want, so we might use our topping lift on the jib boom a little bit there. Okay, and so now everything's flat. The backstay also affects the mast and bends the mast. By tightening the backstay, we bend the mast, so now the mast curve parallels is the same as the curve that's cut into the front of the mainsail, and so all of a sudden we've taken all the fullness out of the mainsail. So not only do we have everything tighter, but we've also made the mast conform to the curve of the front of the mainsail, which takes all the fullness out of the middle of the sail. So your boat now will not be heeled over nearly as much in strong winds, and you'll be able to point super high, especially if it's strong winds and very flat water. If there's not a lot of fetch and waves building up, you'll be able to point incredibly high, almost 30 degrees, within 30 degrees of the true wind. So so you'll get upwind really fast in strong winds and flat seas. If it's choppier, you still want your sails fairly tight, but don't try to point super high, because each wave will be stopping you. You need more power. Maybe don't sheet in quite as tight if it's really choppy, and go for speed rather than pointing really high in choppy water. So if you've got a fetch and waves building up, ease off. Don't try to go higher than 45 degrees. Okay, I think that covers most of the basics of tuning, and we'll give you a good start in making your boat super fast and starting to win races. If other boats are faster than yours, keep working at your tuning until your boat's the fastest one out there, because it's all about tuning. So that's enough to start and know where you should be heading for. But as I say, it's an art, and each boat's a little bit different and tunes differently, which is part of the fun of it. And some days I just can't get my boat feeling like it's tuned right. The boat should sail itself upwind. If you have it tuned right, the less you use your controller and let the boat just do its own thing, the better you'll do. In puffs, it'll come up closer to the wind. In lulls, it'll drop off from the wind all by itself, and you don't have to do anything. But when it's not tuned right, you find yourself having to really sail the boat, and that's not as fast. The less you use your rudder, the less turbulence you create by the rudder, and the faster you'll be. Okay, hopefully that's helpful, and have fun. The big thing is have fun and enjoy the boats, and we have a wonderful sport, so enjoy it. And you want to show out a view out at the lake, Chris? We've got a couple of boats out there sailing here, and be having some nice races.